And again, I don't know about everybody else, but I'm just so happy the first time I learned how to meditate. It just gives so much peace and joy and happiness no matter what happens to you in life. That delight which I mentioned from relaxing the body is one thing, but the happiness which you generate through relaxing the mind is even more kind of delicious. It's hard to find words, for the peace and the happiness generated by the mind in meditation. But also sometimes you can know by how you feel afterwards. I often feel it's like quite a responsibility to give a Dhamma talk to you all every Friday. I want to make sure I never misrepresent the teachings of the Buddha or downplay them at all. Really just want you too to be able to taste that sweetness of being peaceful and how that peace is generated. So how, no matter what you're experiencing in life, you can still find that peace. Life can be very difficult. It doesn't always go the way you want it to. In fact, it hardly ever goes the way you want it to. You may think that that's strange for me, that I'm spiritual director of this, spiritual director of that, abbot of monasteries. You should think I've got all the power in the world. Absolutely not. I remember once going to visit the monastery up in New Norcia. There's a Benedictine monastery. And we got quite friendly with the monks there, simply because, Buddhist monks are kind as well. I know that I was talking to our visitors from Malaysia about ghosts earlier. And this monastery in New Norcia, just north of here, is one of the oldest buildings in Western Australia. So when I was going with the abbot there, Abbot Placid. He passed away some years ago, unfortunately. But when I was walking there, it was such an old place. I asked him, I said, have you ever seen any ghosts in this old abbey? It's been here for a couple of 100 years. You know what he said to me? He said, I'm a Catholic, he said, and Catholics don't believe in ghosts. And I replied, is that so? He said, yes. I said, no, it's not. What about the Holy Ghost? And he poked me, Ajahn Brahm, I can't trust you. We had a good laugh together. But nevertheless, just that peace and joy which can come up because you're kind. You're not really challenging anybody, you can be friendly. I don't agree with what you say, but then, thank you for saying it. And we can always make use of that. Again, all these talks I give, they just flow. I know where they start, but where they go to eventually, I'm not sure. But it was with that friendship with a Catholic Benedictine abbot that once we were asked to co-present at a conference over in the University of Western Australia, a chaplaincy conference. And after saying our bits, the nice thing about conferences is because people have a chance to really challenge you and ask some deep questions. And one of the people who was there at this occasion, I'd heard of him before. This is the first time I'd spoken to him, was this Catholic intellectual called Frank Brennan. And he was really a smart fellow. He had been asked by the Prime Minister of the time, I forget who it was at that time, to lead a research project to try and reform the Australian Constitution. He was incredibly, like a genius. So, when he asked me a question, I thought, I hope it's an easy one. But what he asked me, he said, "You're a Buddhist monk. What's the Buddhist concept of God?" And I couldn't tell a joke, because intellectuals don't have a sense of humour. That's what I found anyway. So, how could you answer that? Now, if I asked you that question, what would your answer be? Sometimes a philosophical point. Buddhists don't believe that this world was created by any being. If they did, they made a big mess of it. But that's not a very good answer. That divides people, creates no peace, and creates difficulties with people of different perceptions. So the way I answered it was this, in front of a very knowledgeable person. And I said, "My friend Abbot Placid, we've had lots and lots of discussions about not just ghosts, but all sorts of things. And one thing he said to me, he keeps repeating to me. And I said, the first time I heard this, I just didn't agree with this at all. But he kept on saying that one of his core beliefs was everybody is searching for God. Now, don't react. That's what I did when I first heard that. That's what he believed. So I used that comment, something from a friend, and I said, well, if we accept that with respect as true, this is what he keeps telling me, as a Buddhist, what do I keep searching for? As my audience here, from Malaysia, locals, those people listening to this online, what are you searching for in your life? When you come all this way to Perth from Kuala Lumpur, and you're visiting all these monasteries you've heard of, Dhammasara and Kusala Vihara and all these other places, why? Why do you come? Why are you searching? What are you searching for? No, I can't speak for you, but I said, as a Buddhist monk, you search for peace. You search for some idea of truth. You search for loving kindness. It's wonderful to be able to give loving kindness to somebody else. And it's wonderful to receive kindness. It's a beautiful thing. And so if ever I've given any of you kindness, forgiveness, warmth, I don't really feel I'm giving it to you. That you're allowing me to share it with you is a much better way of saying it. Because I don't think I'm giving, I'm not losing anything. And that ability, to love and be loved, to share with your friends, the ability to, search for meaning in life, whatever that meaning is for you, that type of freedom, I think that's what people search for. And so I said, if my friend here, Abbot Placid, calls that God, that must be what God is. Peace, truth, kindness, that freedom to love and be loved, to be respected. That's one thing which so many people in this world search for today, to be respected. I can kind of imagine what it must feel like to be one of the LGBTQIA+ group. For so many years, marginalized, criticized, and not finding they have a part in this world. They're stigmatized. Not just LGBTQIA+, anyone who's slightly different, slightly not with all of their limbs like everybody else, who's slightly deformed, injured, blind, not hearing properly. People who have been traumatized by some terrible events in life. You know, one of the most terrible things about that, they think they don't belong anymore. They've been hurt. They just want to crawl into some hole somewhere. Those of you who've had relationships which didn't work out, sometimes you think you don't want to try anymore to form a bond with another human being. Sometimes that's why many people feel that animals are a little bit more advanced than getting another husband or wife. Get a dog instead. But each one of these, you can see that what people really want is acceptance, being understood. They maybe not be perfect, but they're human beings, or they're beings, animals, who just want to live their life in peace, have enough to eat, have their friends, do whatever they need to do. And I'm talking about kangaroos now. Just this morning, just walking past a group of kangaroos at Bodhinyana Monastery. After all these years, I've learned how to walk past them without disturbing them. Just walking slowly and just not making eye contact, just looking down. So sometimes if I look at them, they look back. You can see they get tense. And just being able to walk right past them, they know I'm walking past, but they don't react at all. Given that freedom, I'm another animal in this forest, which we share. So this is little things where we learn how to give others respect. Do you ever feel that you are disrespected because of who you are? Your shape, your size, your age, your deformities which people try to hide. I say that lack of respect causes huge amounts of problems afterwards. Minority religions in some place when they're not respected. So sometimes you feel that's what a lot of people want and need. And unfortunately you can give that to people. Again, some of these stories you've heard before, because I give so many talks, there's only a certain amount of experiences I've had in my 71 and a bit years. So I do repeat them, but it fits in. There's a beautiful story where that one time I was invited to give a lecture at the Mental Health Week here in Perth. And the lecture was given in our convention centre in Perth. So when I went into the room, as you know, even for conferences, I don't prepare anything. Because what I feel is much better is to look at the audience. It's one of the reasons I keep scanning your faces. And just to pick up on who you are and where you are and what you need. And so I was picking up on the people who were, they call them clients of the mental health services in Perth. And I gave them these wonderful similes. And then afterwards, remember these two Australian ladies, middle-aged, they came out afterwards and they came straight to me and said, "We need to apologize to you, Ajahn Brahm." Because this middle-aged Australian lady said, "When I saw you go in your brown robes and bald head, I told my friend, please excuse the language, who is this wanker?" Yeah, you know that word, don't you? It's not a very polite word. It's pointing to me. And then afterwards, during the talk, you made us laugh and you made us weep. Thank you. We should not say that word to you ever again. But that fascinated me. Why did you say that? That you apologized? What did I teach which was so wonderful for you? And that was a simile I keep on repeating about the simile of the bent and warped and damaged trees in the forest. I say that because that's where I spent my life. I've always been a forest monk. I spent my life in forests, whether that was over in Thailand or in Australia. So this, and even when I went to Hong Kong recently, just for one afternoon, we went into, I'd never thought there were forests in Hong Kong. We found one, and I spent just a few hours there, just meditating on a rock in the forest, and just kind of felt at home there. So anyway, in the forest, even in woods or in parks, you will never see a perfect tree. Every tree is bent, crooked, with branches having been torn off, with leaves having been eaten by bugs, or going brown for some other reason, and with damage on their trunk. I've never seen a perfect tree in my whole life. So that was the first thing which I said to these clients of the mental health system. If you are bent and crooked and twisted with things missing, welcome, you belong in the forests called humanity, human beings of life. There's no human being in this world who is perfectly formed. You're all twisted and bent somewhere. You hide that pretty well, but eventually if you get to know somebody, they are all been bent by life. And the last thing which I said, and it's true, I'm not just exaggerating, the more damaged you have been, the more beautiful you are. As a tree, I got my favorite trees in Bodhinyana Monastery. They're not the ones which are the straightest. They're the ones with the most damage on them because of storms or other trees falling on them. Don't you agree? Which tree would you like to stay with? The damaged ones or the ones which are dead straight? All their leaves and in green and all their branches in the right place. That's what made these people cry. Because they'd always felt that they weren't good enough. Twisted, damaged goods. Who would want us? And to explain why you are welcome, why you belong, and why you can be some of the most beautiful, inspiring people which other people like to be with. That made them laugh too. And I told this to, again, someone just recently. And where did I get these ideas from? Yes, through meditation, but also through life. Because when I was a student in my early years, I was a Buddhist then. When I was about 16, that's when I realized I was a Buddhist. And then when I was 18 and went to university, some of my friends were Christians. And I thought it was really important, even then and now, to be able to mix with people of different religions, different ideas. I wanted to be open to be challenged. If I just hang out with people who thought like me, maybe I couldn't see the faults in my understanding. So I deliberately hang out with friends who weren't Buddhists. And one day 2 of those friends said they were doing some social service, volunteering to help at the local mental hospital near to Cambridge. And that embarrassed me. Like, what are you Buddhists doing? You Buddhists talk about compassion, but you don't do anything. We Christians, we serve. That really riled me. It was total ego. I admit that, full on. But I wanted to make sure that Buddhists was respected as the Christians. If the Christians could do it, then the Buddhists could also do it. That's not the right way to think, but that's how I thought. So I went along with them, volunteering, just to fly the flag of Buddhism on my own ego. But then what happened was kind of stunned me. My two friends, they only lasted for a couple of weeks. And I visited for 2 years. I looked forward to it, doing that social service. It was working with people who had Down's syndrome. And I would worry how to talk to people who are so physically damaged, because you can see someone who's suffered from Down syndrome, you can recognize the type. But more than that, to recognize how they can communicate with you. And after a while, you learn how to respect and communicate. And they reveal some amazing characteristics and wisdom which I never ever expected. And I thought afterwards, why do I always like going there for 2 years? And what happened at the very end wasn't really the end. I used to go in the afternoon and do some occupational therapy, just making something, just talking. But anyway, I was so used to them and I was so trusted, even though I was a volunteer, they let me take these classes by myself. Had one class before, this was tea time. So we'd stop in the middle for a cup of tea, and they gave me the other class afterwards. I took both classes. Then afterwards, they said, we're meeting together now. They made me cry, both classes. Because they said, we realise you got your final exams next week. You won't be able to come again. So we've made you all these gifts. Say thank you. And I was emotional. It meant so much to me that I thought I was just doing this for myself or to do something good. But to see just how all these Down syndrome people showed their affection for me. And I valued that immensely. So you can imagine, true story, how difficult it was for me to say, my final exams don't start for 2 weeks. Can I please come back next week? So I came back after my last day. Because I loved to. Why? It's because there was something which I learned. They didn't have a name for it in those days. It was only later on we got this beautiful word called emotional intelligence. Intellectually, the people with Down syndrome had very low intelligence by the way we measured things. But emotionally, they were way off the scale. And again, I keep repeating these tales, but the only way you can really describe it. One day when I turned up, even from a distance, one of them saw me and came running towards me. They never did that before. And this man put his arms around me and gave me this huge hug. Now, I was not gay. I had girlfriends. And that was quite embarrassing to be hugged in public by another guy. But these were Down syndrome people, so I gave them that freedom. Then I had to ask him, why? Why did you run and are now hugging me? And he looked into my eyes and said, "There's something wrong today with you. What happened?" And that stunned me. How on earth could he know the night before I'd separated from my girlfriend? He could see, he was sensitive enough, just seeing my facial features or something, that I was sad. His emotional intelligence stunned me. So this is actually why that even now you have intellectual intelligence. I can teach you all about the Four Noble Truths and dependent origination for hours if you wish. But what does it mean? That emotional intelligence is some of the most important parts of Buddhism. The kindness, the sensitivity, the openness, the being willing to learn from others and about yourself as well. That kindness. You know, when I came in here, I thought, what am I going to talk about this evening? I thought I'd talk about virtue, rules and regulations. Is that a good thing to talk about? Sometimes that, I'm getting, no, I'm not getting old, I'm old. This is next month I will celebrate my 40th year in Western Australia as a monk. I've been a monk for almost 48, 49 years now. And all these rules which I've been keeping all this time. And as one, are you still there? This one man once told me, he said, "I'd love to be a monk as long as I can have every Saturday evening off." And I said, come on, it's not about having evenings off. You're doing this because every day and every evening you love being a monk. You can see its purpose. Why would you ever want to give that up? And that's how it feels after so long as being a monk. You actually feel the joy of virtue. Because the virtue is nothing more than kindness, emotional intelligence towards yourself and other beings. That's what virtue is. I still recall, for those of people who want to know things from the texts, that once the Buddha had a son, and that was before he was a Buddha, obviously. And when the Buddha's grandfather said to the son, "Go and ask your father for your inheritance," the Buddha ordained him as a novice. That was the inheritance. So the Buddha could give his son an inheritance. He gave him ordination and the Dhamma, the teachings, the wisdom, the peace, the kindness. And he told his son, there's only 2 precepts you ever need to keep. And I say that to each one of you. Now as nuns who keep, 311 precepts, monks 227, novices 10 precepts, 8 preceptors 8 precepts, 5 precepts for everybody else. And you know that if you come tomorrow for the dharna, which we have at 10:30, I often say that once the food has been put on the table and the monks have taken their portion, that everybody else can now take their food for today, but please let the 8 preceptors go first, because the 8 precepts they won't be eating in the evening. And after the 8 preceptors, then the 7 preceptors can go next. Then the 6 preceptors, the 5 preceptors, then the 4 preceptors, the 3 preceptors, 2 and 1 precept. If you're not keeping any precepts at all, you don't belong in here, get out. I'm only joking. But nevertheless, people sometimes like numbers and how many precepts you're taking. Maybe this talk is too serious, but this was once at a Sri Lankan temple. I asked people, how many precepts are you taking today? You know what they said? We're taking 13 precepts. And all my life as a monk, I'd never heard that before. I've heard about 8 precepts and 5 precepts, but 13 precepts, what are those? Because the 8 precepts is basically the 5 precepts plus not eating anything in the afternoon. So what are the 13 precepts? And they said, oh well, the 13 precepts are, we keep the 8 precepts in the morning and the 5 precepts in the afternoon. 8 plus 5 means 13. And of course that's just a scab. But the Thais were even worse. You've got to be fair to 2 main Buddhist groups. You know what the Thais did? When I was a young monk there, when everybody took the 5 precepts, they'd always put their hands up like this. But after being in Perth for many years, when I visited Thailand, I saw one man had his hands like this. I'd never seen that before. So I asked him, what does that mean? Because he was chanting the 5 precepts, Parnati, the whole lot. He said, oh, this means I'm only keeping 4 precepts today. And that made me interested. I started to look around, and sure enough, he saw one person with 2 fingers down, and then one person, all his fingers down. He wasn't keeping any precepts at all. So that made me laugh. I said, look, that's not the meaning of virtue. The meaning of virtue is just keeping 2 precepts. Being kind to all other beings. Being kind to yourself. 2, that's all you need. Because those 2 precepts, everything else comes from that. Living simply. So I don't consume much. Again, the visitors from Malaysia, many of you saw my cave for the first time, where I live, where I meditate, where I sleep. It's small, nothing much in there. If you had a place like that to stay in Kuala Lumpur, imagine how easy it will be to clean. 5 minutes and it's clean, because it's not big. And look, you may have a big mansion with, how many rooms do you have in your house? How many rooms can you stay in? Only 1. Why do you need all those rooms for? A lot of it's because everyone else does. I don't think that's a good argument. So I keep it nice and simple. And when I go back there, it's beautiful. Nice, simple place where you can live. That's being kind to me. So I don't have to worry about anything. I close my eyes there to meditate. I lay down to sleep. It's peaceful, it's silent, it's simple. Imagine, we have a thing now in Australia, actually in many places in the world, tiny houses. We thought about that in Buddhism years ago. We call them kutis, places where monks and nuns live. Tiny and wonderful, secluded and peaceful. But you know what? It's very difficult to get permission to have tiny houses now. If any of you work for a council, they've got regulations. You have to have a kitchen, you have to have this, you have to have something else. Why? So anyway, living simply is a blessing. It's being kind to yourself and kind to others. You're not using up too many of the world's resources. And even our possessions, robes. Or those of you who came last week, those of you who saw me in Kuala Lumpur when was it, November? December, okay. What robe was I wearing then? This one, same one. It has been washed since. It's so wonderful being a monk or being a nun. You don't have to worry what the fashion is. You've been wearing these things for 2,000 odd years. The same design, the same fashion. It's such, even your hair. I don't know why people have long hair. It's just, so difficult. You have to wash it in the morning, and you have to go to hairdressers to get it sort of fashioned, the latest fashion. Even some people, when they get old, they have to dye it. I don't dye my hair. It's actually very practical. Just once every fortnight, you just shave it off. Doesn't cost anything. And to wash your hair, you're under the shower, you wash your skin, you wash your hair, everything, all in one go. Very much more efficient. So that's just kindness. So after a while, I love this life of being a monk. The best thing which I like about it, when you're virtuous, you're good. You don't sort of cheat people. You don't sort of scam anybody. That's actually one of the reasons why I love it when you go to my room and see where I live. Hopefully those of you who went today from Kuala Lumpur, I hope you did look under my mattress. There's nothing there. No contraband is stashed there. Although I love telling this story that once I did receive some contraband. You know what it was? This Thai people, they offer me this big, what's it, like a bucket, plastic buckets, full of allowable requisites, mostly for the kitchen, some oil, some salt or something, and other stuff, for washing, full of the requisites which monastery needs. And of course I received that and gave it to one of we call the Anagarikas in white, to take it down to the kitchen. And they came up again 5 minutes later. I said, Ajahn Brahm, do you realize what you've just received? It's just a bucket of requisites. And they showed me right in the middle, just covered with hidden by other things, was a bottle of Johnny Walker whiskey. It's the only time in my life I've received a bottle of Johnny Walker. I couldn't believe it. And of course I laughed, because what happens in the Thai Buddhist tradition, that I think their grandfather had died, and the only way to ensure their grandfather can receive the whiskey which he really liked when he was alive, up in heaven or wherever he was supposed to be reborn, the only way they could get it to him was hide it and trick a good senior monk into receiving it. Don't try that, please. So I went down into the kitchen area, which many of you know, and I told the Anagarica to pour it down the sink. So can't we give it to anybody else? Of course not. Just the bugs or whatever in the sink. I think that must have really damaged the biomax system over there, because alcohol kills all those good bugs anyway. But anyway, that's what I did. But anyway, just this is actually how we understand and how we're good to ourselves and good to other people. That kindness, which means we don't need that sort of stuff. You know what also happened? This was, again, another Thai story, that this general in the army, was also a politician, I think. He had a dream. His dream was that his father up in heaven was getting plenty of food, because that's what they gave to the monks, but wasn't receiving enough water. So from that day on the arms round in Thailand, everybody was given his bottled water into the monks' bowls. And he got so much water, there was no space for any other food. No rice, nothing. And it's really heavy, carrying all these bottles of waters in the monk's bowl. So eventually we figured that one out. We said, now up in heaven, there are so many empty plastic bottles. It's a pollution hazard. Heaven used to be nice and clean in the old days. So you don't need to do that. But anyway, that kindness, sometimes it can be misplaced, but when the kindness is with wisdom, with understanding, it's incredibly powerful. So those two precepts, never doing anything which hurts another person or hurts oneself, becomes the basic virtue which we live by. And you can figure it out for yourself, what is hurtful for you. It even goes deeper than just things. Worrying about the past, being anxious about the future, who does that help? The only people it helps is psychologists. That's what they live on. But you don't need to. It's a beautiful thing to be able to let go of all that past, all those stupid things which I did in the past. I did quite a few stupid things when I was young. And I got a scare the other day when one of our old Anagarikas, I think you know him, you don't mind me saying this, Amandus. You know Amandus? Many of you? Up in monastery? But anyway, he's been staying in monastery for a long time now. How old is he now, Venerable? Is that 70? No, he's older than me. 80 almost. 80, yeah, that's Amandus. He found out, first time he knew about it, he's got a son. And his son came to visit him. Fortunately, his son didn't want anything, just wanted to make contact. They're very nice people. So they stayed at monastery in Janagrove for a few days. But then I thought, Ajahn Brahm, what did you get up to before you were a monk? So you get up to all sorts of mischief, but not too bad. I think I'm safe, hopefully. But to be able to let all of that past go, it's a beautiful thing to do. So you don't define yourself by some things which you did a long time ago. Again, all the times when I've done any counselling with anybody, especially what's most obvious with prisoners. I used to spend a lot of time teaching in jail, and it was a wonderful experience. I felt more safe in jail than in many other parts of our world. The reason was because I'd been kind to each one of those prisoners. I didn't know what they'd done, but some of them were very violent. There's one time, they could be violent to me. I thought, rape would only happen with those male prisoners to women. I said, no, we're not gender specific when we abuse somebody. And this one time, that when I checked in at one of these main top security jails, they gave me this little biro pen. And they said, just put it in your pocket. So I'm a monk. I don't have a pocket. Oh, you just hold it. And he said, because there had been so many assaults on visitors, even men, they said that you have to take one of these pens, and on the ceilings, we told the prisoners that these are fire detectors. In case there's any fire, that these smoke detectors, then an alarm will go off, but they're not really smoke detectors. They're just emergency alarms for our visitors, like you. If any of those prisoners tries to rape you, just point that pen at one of the sensors, press the top, the alarm will go off and will come and save you. They were serious. This has actually happened. It wasn't a joke. So when I went into my class, one of the guys there, I'd known for a long time in jail. He had scars all over him. He was one of the tough guys there. He was sitting. He was the guy, when I first went into prison to teach, he was the one who interrupted me, stood up, put his hand up and said, "Is it really true that through meditation you can learn how to fly over walls?" Actually, I'm not making that up. He said that. But he became a good friend after many years. He never learned how to fly over the walls. But he was sitting right in front of me. And he told me, he said, "Ajahn Brahm, you've got one of those security pens too, have you? It's supposed to be top secret." But they all knew what was going on. And he was the one who said, "Ajahn Brahm, do you really think you can press the top of that pen before we jumped you and raped you?" When you're alone with so many big prisoners, sometimes, that can be scary. I said, "No, I probably couldn't even think of pressing the top of the pen before you jumped on me." He said, "Yeah, that's true, we're really fast." But then he smiled and he said, "But Ajahn Brahm, you don't have to worry at all, because we like you. We love you in this jail. If any of those prisoners in the back tried anything on you, myself and my friends will jump on them first." He meant it. And that always gave this wonderful sense of security. Not because I was tough or fast or I had some security alarm, because I had kindness. And that kindness had just melted the heart of these violent prisoners over many years. And I felt so safe in those places. It's the kindness, the virtue, the goodness. That is what protects you. It's not just like being a doormat for everybody. It's actually much better than that. It's like just being a good friend. Respecting people who very rarely found any respect from any visitor. And that's one of the reasons why it works. That is what virtue is. Virtue does protect each one of you, as long as it's coming, not just keeping some sort of rules, but understanding what people really want, respect and kindness, and a good friend. People understand that we all make mistakes. We're not defined by mistakes. We're defined instead, not by the past, but how we can learn from them and become wonderful human beings in the present. Not worrying about the future, because the future will always be work in progress, never finished, never defined, always can be amended for the better. So once again, I've talked too much. I'm just looking at the clock. So I'll finish off the main part of this talk now. I don't know what you want to call it, on virtue or kindness or whatever, but and how people want to be respected and how giving people that respect. Even those of you in partnerships, please, for goodness sake, respect one another. If somebody makes a mistake, instead of criticizing them, and it really hurts you when you find they made a mistake, give them a big hug. That's what they want more than anything else. To understand that they are fallible, they make mistakes, and they got the kindness from the person who they committed their lives to. It's a beautiful thing when that happens. The wonderful forgiveness and understanding that no one is perfect. So when you make an error in your accounts, Madhu, you don't need to worry at all. You won't get the sack. You say, "Oh, you made a mistake. That's fine. Just don't do it again." You can imagine that makes people want to come to work. They want to join our Buddhist society because they don't get criticized or downgraded or anything. They just get well done and they get inspired. And maybe one day you will be at Dhammaloka and I will go there to give the second ordination for you one day. Who knows? and each one of you. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Anyway, again, I stopped talking. Okay, now, any questions? Okay, one from the front here before we get the internet ones. Okay, yes. Say your question, I'll repeat it. Okay, when you're seeing kangaroo, oh, you got the microphone now. Go on. It's just I found out that sometimes scares them. When you look into their eyes, you can see them just reacting. But when I just look down and just walk straight past them, they don't react. It's just like, I'm letting them be. Now, even when I'm looking at your eyes, you can see there's a little bit of tightness and tension there, simply because that's the way we communicate. So there's all sorts of beautiful ways like that. In my eyes, it didn't disturb me. I know that's your husband sitting next to you there, so that is fine. I know you for such a long time, and I do that as well, because when you keep eye contact, in Western countries, that means like you've got nothing to hide. It gives you a sense of trustworthiness. But know that in Thailand, where I trained as a monk, say don't look at people's eyes, put your eyes down when you're giving a talk. And that's just culture. That's also one of the reasons why if ever you see us doing some big ceremonies like Katina ceremony in Bodhinyana Monastery, we put a big fan in front of our face. It makes it more like impersonal. And also, it also means that when we have this big ceremonial fan in front of us, we can actually pace the chanting we're supposed to do in front, and no one knows we're just reading it out, we're not just remembering it. It is a bit of fun and honesty. So thank you. Oh, we've got some questions online. I'll do some questions online first. And last week I went on way too long. And just one little announcement, sorry I didn't make this, because we're having the AGM tomorrow from 3 till 4, we have to somehow shorten the meditation. The meditation, I think that's really important. So we will finish at 4 o'clock the meditation, but any questions, especially from overseas, we're going to please limit it to 3 questions from overseas, whoever's doing the IT service over there, instead of 6 or 7, so it won't be that long. So we've got 2 questions here from Germany and from India. This is actually where these broadcasts go to. Dear Ajahn, why there are emphasis on Nibbana, etc.? Is practice and meditation not good enough? Is it not craving if you want anything? Isn't being a good person not good enough? What else can I do? It is when one understands Nibbana is not a state you attain or go to. Nibbana is when things disappear. When things go, the less you have, the closer you are to Nibbana. For those of you who don't know this, I usually just say this on retreats. The word Nibbana was well understood even by little children in the villages of India at that time. They would use an oil lamp for light, no electricity. And if somehow or other the wick was all burnt through, needed replacing, or the oil had been all used up, or a wind had blown the flame away, the heat away, the kid would say, "Mummy, Mummy, the oil lamp has Nibbana'd." That's what it meant. They didn't use Nibbana, they used the word Nibbutto. It's in the Ratana Sutta, which many people in Sri Lanka chant often. And that's what Nibbana meant. Even the kids understood that. But now we get metaphysical and we think Nibbana is a place. where if you've been good meditators and very wise and deep meditation, you'd all go there in the end. It's not a place, it's a vanishing of everything. The flame has gone out. When the flame goes out, where does it go to? That's not a tenable question. It doesn't go anywhere. It's just out. A process has ended. I gave this simile in a little card as a gift to this very elderly man I've known for so many years in Thailand. That was actually Dr. Sanot Unakun. He was a very senior man. He was in the Privy Council for His Majesty the King over in Thailand. We became friends because when I was on my year as a wandering monk, I go to some very remote areas, and he kept on turning up in those areas as a young monk. And so I met him many times. And so later on, when I was doing the visas for the foreign monks under Ajahn Chah, I would take those papers to him, and he would actually make sure they went to the right persons so the monks could get their visas. So I got to know him very well. And anyway, I mentioned to him that when a person does become enlightened, they're like a meteor which has been traversing the galaxy, for so many millions and billions, uncountable times, going round and round and round and round, like a human being being reborn many times in samsara, many births. Then finally that meteor meets the planet Earth. And when it gets into the atmosphere of the Earth, it burns up through the friction. And that's how it ends, in this beautiful blaze of light. That's like the enlightened being. So long, round and round the realms of rebirths. And finally, when they meet truth, peace, understanding, poof, they go out in a beautiful blaze of light. So, is practice of meditation, of course it's good enough, but this is where it leads to things disappearing. Craving, if you want anything, you don't want anything. If you want Nibbana, you'll never get it. Isn't being a good person not good enough? Yeah, be a good person, and be good and good and good and good, and then lots of problems disappear. Okay, dear Ajahn, you always talk about trusting the process. Can you please give us some tips on trusting the process? How can we train on this on an everyday basis? Taking the process of kindness. A lot of people don't trust kindness. You always think you'll be exploited, be used as a doormat. I'm a Buddhist monk for many years, otherwise known as doormat. You can exploit me as much as you can. In other words, it's a joy to give. If I do get tired, I'll find some reason of escaping and going back to my room because I've run out of energy. But nevertheless, I trust the process. If I'm kind to you, you're kind to me. I'm amazed at your kindness and how you look after all the monks and nuns. Okay, I'm into monastic stuff this evening. You know how many monks and nuns we have here in Western Australia? We have, we're just trying to work it out, about 30 monks over in Bodhinyana Monastery. We got Venerable Mudu down in Albany. We got 3 or 4 monks in Kusala Vihara. I don't know how many nuns we've got over in Dhammaloka, but there's another one coming on Sunday. Heaps of monks and nuns here. How many monks and nuns have you got in Malaysia? Do we outnumber you? I mean, talk Theravada monks and nuns. I think we probably do. Why? And it's just because of kindness and goodness and trusting the process that many people want to become monks. And they see the value in it. They enjoy it. It's a wonderful lifestyle you can give to others. And the comments you get back are just amazing. You're making a difference. Why do you always come on a Friday evening? Look how many of you come. What do you get out of this? What do you get out of hearing the same old stories again and again? They get deeper and you get more out of them. You get inspiration, joy and meaning. And you do actually also become better human beings yourself. So that's the process. Being kind, listening, meditating, being a good person. You may have some bumps along the process journey, but it always works out fine. Okay, so thank you all for listening. Any last question before we finish off? Okay, you got your hand up first, and Eddie, you have to have a question, otherwise it's not a Dharma Talk. But anyway, you had a question over here. He got his hand up a moment first, and you can finish off. Yeah. You go, okay. No, okay, just shout it out and I can repeat it. How do you draw the line between being kind to yourself and being kind to others? Learning, it's not about being kind to me, it's not about being kind to you, it's being kind to us. So this is your family, is that a partner or next to you? Sister, okay. You got a wife? A girlfriend? Looking for one? That's great, you're being honest, well done. If you want to be really attractive, be wise and be happy. So anyway, that's why, you all know this, when there's only marriage, which I give the blessing for, I always say you should, once you have got a girlfriend or your partner marriage, you should never think of yourself, you should never think of her. Just think of us. It's about us. This is your group. This Buddhist society here, is it just about monks? Just about nuns? Just about committees? Is it just about you? No, it's all about us. So when you expand, then it's never about me. It's never about you. It's about us. Okay, Eddie. No, it's not working, it seems. Just shout it out. Yeah, is it working? Doesn't look like it. It's working again. Yeah? Yeah. Yes, yeah.
The Buddha was telling us that we are the creator of our happiness and our sorrow.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a very strong thing.
Yes.
So don't you think, like, say for example, we get bed bugs.
Yeah.
What's our problem? We have to train our minds.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just untied. Yeah.
Train our mind because we are, like how we receive, a lot of the bribes
Yeah.
press from people giving them a ship, for example.
Yes.
So we have to train our mind because the Buddha gives a lot of tools,
Yes.
Like for example, like to guard itself, like we train our mind from reflecting the negativity and all these things.
Yes, yeah. Indeed, yes. I mean, there's so many similes like that. If somebody gives me a gift and I don't receive it, it belongs to the first person, yeah.
So we train, and then as we train this thing, then we uplift ourselves.
Indeed. That's the story of the donkey who fell in the well. You know that story? I think I told it 2 or 3 weeks ago. Donkey fell in the well, somebody tried to bury it alive, and every time a shovelful of earth fell on that donkey, the donkey just stamped it in and got an inch higher. Another shovelful of earth, thank you, stamped it in, got a bit higher. Instead of when people throw dirt at you, thinking, why are you throwing that at me? I don't deserve that. You accept it, stamp it in, you get a bit higher, a bit higher, a bit higher, a bit higher, until you can jump out of the well. So that's a nice thing. I usually tell that to politicians. When people shovel dirt all over you, say thank you, get a bit higher, if you know how to use it. Yeah, it just is it. Why not? It's that training. Just don't follow. It's not just training, Eddie. It's coming to places like this. You get re-brainwashed. It is true. I admit that. You keep hearing the same stories again and again and again, and then you start teaching them to others. You start behaving like that. It makes life much more fun. Okay, so we can now finish off for the evening. Some people are getting tired. I was yawning too, just tiredness. So we can now pay respects to Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, and we can finish the formal part of the evening. Supatipano Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang